Lunaverse, Episode 2, Family Matters, by Rainbow Doubledash, Chapter 3, Falling Apart.
And so, that's how I have all these bits.
Dinky finished, explaining to Filthy Rich. She had to admit was getting a little tired of telling the same story over and over again, even if it was a relief not to have her secret all to herself. Filthy Rich nodded slightly as Dinky finished talking, and stamped himself on the floor after a moment, causing Dinky, Sparkle, and Diamond Tiara all to jump slightly. "Well, I'll be!" he exclaimed. "Little Philly, that kind of frugalness and forward thinking is the foundation of a good business. I wouldn't be surprised if your special talent relates to banking or accounting with all of this ethic." Dinky had to imagine had an image pass through her head of her stuck behind a desk, crunching numbers and double-checking figures, trying to balance ledgers, whatever all that meant, and singing to herself about her fate.
I spend my young life accounting with figures and such. To what is my life amounting? It figures not much.
The unicorn filly wasn't sure where the words to the song came from, but they seemed apt.
Gonna be nice,
she said politely to Filthy Rich. Behind the counter, Sparkler once again hid her laugh behind a hoof as she used her magic to magnify the gems in the necklace that Diamond Tiara was inspecting. Dinky had been worried that Diamond Tiara might take a liking to the necklace Dinky was after, but fortunately all her choices had the same thing in common: blue gemstones, and not yellow like the one Dinky had her eyes on. She had passed right by Dinky's own choice without even acknowledging it. Filthy Rich nodded. "It so would. Equestria couldn't exist without the paper pushers, little Philly. But it's not the most glamorous job, but it pays the bills." He smiled at that, and waved a hoof as though pushing the idea aside. "Of course, you're still a little Philly. No need to worry about that quite yet." Dinky shook her head, and Sparkler and Diamond Tiara both came back up to the two of them, the proprietor carrying a necklace in her telekinesis.
All right, Mr. Rich. Your daughter's made her choice, and a very nice one at that, she said. This is one of my best pieces that I made just for my opening in Ponyville. Sparkly pale blue sapphires set in sleek sterling silver with a ray of 18-karat gold plating on delicate ink chain. Also sterling silver.
"Gold?" Filthy asked worriedly, leaning down to inspect the necklace. No pony wore gold. It was much too radiant, like the wrathful sun.
Whitened gold, of course, Sparkle amended. I was originally planning on using platinum for this piece, but I was already reaching my budget when it came as it was with sapphires. No pony but a delicate medical origin with an extraordinary keen eye would be able to tell the difference. It is one of only two of this kind I've made. The first one, which did use platinum, is currently in the collection of 5-string Twilight Velvet.
Dinky regarded the necklace. It was beautiful, but then again, so was everything else in the store. And Dinky wasn't used to jewelry that had no real concept of what meant with what. However, Dinky was surprised that Diamond Tiara had chosen such a small necklace. The pendant that the sapphires were set into was barely an inch in diameter, even at that much.
This piece cost 770 bits.
Filthy Rich said. "Is that with or without?"
Is it with the 25% off? Yes. Ah, that explains it,
Dinky thought. Diamond Tiara must have been looking simultaneously for sapphires and very high price tags.
Please, Daddy,
Diamond Tiara asked her father, rubbing her head against the point of his shoulders.
Please, oh, please, oh, please, oh, please.
Filthy Rich could not stand up against such an onslaught. "Well, why don't you and Dinky go and look around the shop some more while I and Miss Star talk about it, okay?" Diamond Tiara nodded fervently, doing little to hide a smile over what she knew was the triumph of her cuteness and power over her father. Filthy Rich seemed to realize this as well, but looked like he was going to make at least a token effort of trying to haggle the price of the necklace. Sparkle rolled her eyes at the knowledge that she had to haggle. Either Filthy Rich nor his daughter-in-law, but Dinky also did, and it was her turn to hide a slight giggle as she wandered over to the necklace was going to be getting for her mother. To her surprise, Diamond Tiara actually did join her. She had been expecting the Earth Pony Philly to instead pick her own jewelry store to display at to stare at.
Is that what you're going to get for your mom?
She asked.
Dinky nodded. The gem matches my mama's eyes and the silver in my mama's coat.
Diamond Tiara stared down at her nose at the necklace, appraising it.
Not really much to look at, is it?
She asked. Dinky frowned. She had been hoping that Diamond Tiara was going to be nice. Apparently her hopes had been misplaced.
I don't have a daddy paying for me. I've only got 100 bits, but I know she'll love it.
Diamond Tiara again considered Dinky Doo, the bag that was once more on Dinky's back, and the fact that there was 100 hard-earned bits inside.
Did you really not steal all those? No, I had to work. I cleaned up around the house outside with the chickens, and I used to like chickens, but now I hate them because they're mean, and they smell, and they go into the bathroom everywhere. But I earned every bit.
Dear Ponyville blinked at that. She looked like she needed, for posterity's sake, to ask once more, just to be sure, and finally seemed satisfied with the answer.
I guess it's pretty nice that you're spending all that money on your mom, and that you could save it all up.
It took Dinky several minutes to realize that her jaw was hanging open, and she needed to use a hoof to close it. Diamond Tiara had just, begrudgingly, complimented her. Diamond Tiara noticed her shocked expression and scowled as she stomped her hoof.
Look, I'm just saying what it is, okay? I'm just acknowledging it. It doesn't mean anything.
After a moment of considering, she leaned in close, eyes narrowing.
You better not tell any pony in school I said that.
Dinky nodded, willing to agree to that demand in return for Diamond Tiara showing that, somewhere, she really did have a heart, or at least something that resembled one. She turned back to the display case, wondering if she should pay Diamond Tiara a compliment in turn. Even as she thought that, words came tumbling from her mouth.
Skitterloo said the exact same thing.
For a moment, Diamond Tiara's coat seemed to be red rather than pink.
No, she didn't. Yeah, she did. Just a few minutes ago. Those exact words. I guess it is pretty nice. I'm not like Skitterloo, not even just saying the same things. Skitterloo just falls asleep in class and doesn't do work and thinks she's so cool on her scooter, but she's not.
Dinky had a feeling there was something more complex than she, or Diamond Tiara for that matter, fully understood driving Diamond Tiara's words, and decided to drop it.
Okay.
Princess? Filthy Rich's voice inquired. Dinky and Diamond Tiara both turned to look, and saw that Filthy Rich had finished his conversation with Sparkler, the latter of whom was sliding Diamond Tiara's necklace into a small box, as well as using magic to wrap up another box, the contents of which were a mystery to Dinky Doo. Diamond Tiara, for her part, smiled brightly as she galloped up to her father.
Oh, thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you!
She guessed, with what even Dinky could tell was part of a well-planned and perfected routine. She immediately, however, had eyes on the other box.
What else did you get me?
Sparkler wasn't fast enough to hide her burst of laughter, though she did manage to keep it to a single ha. Filthy Rich turned to glare at her, but by that time he did, Sparkler had already managed to put on a straight face and focus intently on wrapping the box up. No, he said after a moment. Something for your mother. Seemingly, Diamond Tiara didn't seem distraught by the idea of her mother also getting a present. She just nodded as Filthy took the bag containing his purchases into his teeth. Now, if any pony asks, he said on the way out, I spent 700 bits on your mother and 150 on you. Okay, honey? Dinky didn't get to hear how that conversation continued as the door to Sparkler's door closed. Now free from having to keep up appearances, Sparkler laughed aloud at what she had heard Filthy Rich saying on his way out as she made her way over to Dinky from behind the counter, and Dinky joined in.
That foal,
Sparkler said as he looked down at Dinky,
is the best example of a daddy's little filly I have ever seen. The dust in this room. She had all plays him like a half-jangled kazoo. Is she always like that?
Dinky nodded, or started before calling the recent past.
Not always, she conceded, though she didn't keep herself from adding, but usually, yeah.
Ditzy Doo had given up on walking, and instead flown over to Sweet Apple Acres, giving her hooves a much-needed break, if not her shoulders or jock, as the muscles on both were necessarily worked out by the flapping of her wings. It meant that she was delaying the entire middle of her route, of course, but she decided that the trade-off was necessary to prevent her from collapsing on the street somewhere. Her oath, she reasoned as she slid several envelopes into the Amethyst mailbox, didn't mention anything about delays, after all.
Neither sleet, nor rain, nor darker night, nor glare of day shall keep me from the swift completion of my appointed routes. Oh, shut up, Ditzy demanded of herself as she took wing again, sailing away from Sweet Apple Acres and back towards Ponyville proper, though she would land while still outside of town to prevent herself from crossing into things. That line could be interpreted any number of ways. If swift completion was the goal, then this route would be split in half and divided among two Pegasus ponies. Of course, it was split in half and divided amongst two ponies before I— Shut up, me! Ditzy said again. She realized that she was talking to herself, and worse, interrupting and responding. Still, as she was cognizant of both these facts, she was reasonably certain that she didn't need to worry. Probably. She would stop talking to herself, just in case. How moist do you? Ditzy blinked as she stopped her forward flight and instead hovered in place, looking down at the ground that was some 50 feet below her. It wasn't easy with only one eye pointing down. Her strap-off was currently making her left eye keep an eye on the few clouds overhead. Still, she spotted her caller quickly enough. A straw-colored earth pony with red hair wearing a large bow in her hair. Apple Bloom? Ditzy asked as she came down, making sure to give the youngest scion of the Apple family plenty of room as she did, as Ditzy's depth perception wasn't the best, and smack! Yikes! Apple Bloom nodded as Ditzy picked herself off the ground, shaking her head. You okay there? Yeah, I'm used to it. Ditzy admitted with a sigh. Depth perception, the bane of her existence. She misjudged the distance from where she had been to the ground, and more importantly, the distance of her host to the ground, and, well, like she told Apple Bloom, she was used to it by now. She shook her head again to clear it, looking to the filly. Something was nagging at the Pegasus's mind at the sight of Apple Bloom, but she wasn't sure what. Aren't you late running for school? Did it get out late? No, it was on time, but every pony in the class followed Dinky into Amethyst Star's— Oops! Ditzy Doo's brow furrowed. Amethyst Star? She knew the name from somewhere. For the life of her, she couldn't quite place it, though for some reason she got a sinking feeling in her stomach at the sound of the name. Why were you following Dinky? I think it was supposed to be a secret, Miss Doo, Apple Bloom admitted, tapping her hose together. Or a surprise, really, but, she leaned in close. You're gonna love it, Miss Doo, but y'all didn't hear from me, okay? Ditzy looked over Apple Bloom, who seemed completely earnest. It wasn't hard to figure out that Dinky was probably getting something together for Ditzy's upcoming birthday. The thought of her filly somehow gathering help from her entire class managed to dispel the worry that Ditzy felt the name Amethyst Star. Okay then. Apple Bloom pressed. You really didn't hear nothing from me, okay? I don't want Dinky mad at me for spoiling the surprise. I don't think Dinky can get mad at any pony, Ditzy asserted the Earth Pony filly. Chicken, sure, but not a pony. She got real mad at school at one time. Ditzy firmly remembered pulled hair, ruffled feathers, mud, noodles, something about Dinky saying that a certain idol of Scootaloo's wasn't so great, and all in all, the one time Dinky had ever seriously gotten in trouble at school or needed a punishment for Ditzy. That was a year ago, and they get along fine now. The latter was especially impressive seeing as Dinky had, by all accounts, lost the fight. Okay, that's true. See you later, Miss Doo. Later, Apple Bloom. Ditzy returned as she turned around, ignoring the slight ache in her hose as she trotted away, head down in thought. Amethyst Star, Amethyst Star. She knew that name. Ditzy stopped her pace after a moment, closing her eyes. She didn't precisely have a photographic memory, but once Ditzy committed something to memory, she rarely forgot it. Obscure things like a name she had probably once heard or twice usually needed some digging, though. A stairwell. A house in Philadelphia. White plaster walls. Pictures hanging on the walls as Ditzy Doo followed Caster Cut upstairs, hips swaying and wings standing in upright since he knew what was coming once he reached the bedroom. Stopping at the top of the stairwell, focusing on one picture, Caster Cut, with a mare Ditzy didn't recognize, and a filly, nearly a mare in her own right, standing between them. Who's this? Ditzy had asked, giggling slightly even as she spoke. She was maybe a little tipsy, just a bit. Caster Cut was an older unicorn, but not too old, middle-aged.
but that hadn't bothered Ditzy since they met. Who cared about age? He saddled up alongside Ditzy, guiding her away. Come on, Ditzy. You don't want to know about that.
No, I do.
Ditzy had insisted.
I really do. I do. I Ditzy Doo.
Castor had been at least as tipsy as her. The sight of her pouting, Doc still shaking back and forth a little, tail switching around, had been enough to convince him. Well, he said, my wife, Maybelle, and my daughter, Amethyst. Sparkler. She prefers Sparkler. It's a nickname. Ditzy stared at her a moment, then giggled. She laughed as she turned and rushed into her bedroom.
You're old.
Really? Castor cut asked as he followed Ditzy through the door, across the floor into bed. Could an old-timer do this? Ditzy's eyes snapped open, wide as dinner plates, mouth hanging wide.
No.
She breathed, turning around and galloping under Apple Bloom.
No, 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 Apple Bloom!
The filly hadn't gone far, and turned around to see Ditzy Doo bearing down on her. The filly gave a yelp and shrank back. Somehow, Ditzy managed to rein in her panic.
Apple Bloom, she repeated, I'm not mad at you. I promise you've done nothing wrong, but I need you to tell me. Did you say Amethyst Star?
Apple Bloom stared at Ditzy.
It's supposed to be a surprise. I don't care if...
Ditzy began to shout, but forced herself to stop. She closed her eyes.
Apple Bloom, please. I'm sorry, but I need to know. It's very, very important.
Apple Bloom paused a moment more, before nodding.
Yeah,
She confirmed.
Amethyst Star's fine jewelers. New store opened up in Ponyville. And Dinky's there. Yeah.
Ditzy didn't hear if Apple Bloom had anything else to say as she turned around, wings beating as she took to the air, intent on breaking her personal rule of never flying in Ponyville.
No, 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 please, Luna, no.
I'm sorry about the look I gave you when you came in, Sparkler said as he opened the glass case that Dinky's objective was located in.
You just, well, for a moment anyway, you looked a lot like some pony I knew. You don't like that pony very much,
Dinky surmised. Sparkler nodded.
Well, it's a long story.
She smiled down at Dinky.
You're like the poet opposite of her, though, from what I could tell. Seriously, I'm getting a toothache.
Dinky frowned.
Well, there's a dentist's office just a few buildings away. Dr. Minuet could probably help.
Sparkler laughed as he levitated out the necklace, passing it off to Dinky's hose for her to look over it for air detail, so as to make sure she was certain of her intended purchase. Up close, the necklace looked even more beautiful and perfect for her mother.
I meant that you're just so sweet,
Sparkler explained.
Get it?
Dinky thought for a moment before enlightenment struck.
Oh!
She exclaimed.
That's what Miss Tyranny meant too.
Probably, Sparkler confirmed before nodding her head to Dinky.
So, how does it look up close?
Perfect! I try, Sparkler said nonchalantly, prompting a laugh from Dinky. The two made their way to the cash register. A stray cloud had somehow made its way down low over Ponyville. A Pegasus named Cloud Kicker had been able to buck it out of existence when Ditzy Doo came crashing through it, destroying in the process. The sudden lack of anything to buck off threw Cloud Kicker's balance in the sky, causing her to crash into one of the town's iconic thatched roof homes. Even if Ditzy Doo had noticed, she probably wouldn't have cared at the moment. Ditzy's eyes were focused forward. An act that stung her eyes and made them water if she did it for too long, but she ignored the pain. Theoretically, this should have must improved her flying, but her panic, coupled with the fact that she simply wasn't used to seeing the way ponies without strong bobas had actually did, managed to make things worse. But she was in no state to realize this. Flying low through Ponyville, she smacked into two wooden street signs, splintering one and breaking another one entirely. She didn't notice the pain, but the impacts did force her to the ground. She was up and galloping a moment later, then, taking to the air once more, head snapping left and right quickly as she read the signs of business, looking for the name that enticed her to panic.
Dinky looks exactly like me, but with just a horn instead of wings, she cried out terribly. My name was on the front page of every newspaper just a few weeks ago. She has to know that I live in Ponyville, and she's going to see Dinky and...
Ditzy did turn in time to avoid clashing into a lamppost. This, being made of metal, didn't bend or break, but the glass of the lantern itself did. Ditzy was already up and moving before she could be cut by it, though, and desperately looked for... There! She saw it, tucked in comfortably between a sandwich shop and window panes window repairs. Amethyst stars find Jewlers. Ditzy charts.
I'll just wrap this up,
Sparkler said as he slid the necklace into a box, then got wrapping paper behind her. Dinky, meanwhile, was fishing out the bits from her backpack, using her telekinesis to heft them in stacks of 10 and lay them down as neatly as possible on the countertop. She was going to have 4 bits and 7.5 jangles, the copper smaller units of currency, with 10 jangles to a bit left over, according to Sparkler. Dinky smiled, despite the precise nature of lifting up bits and laying them on the counter. She was nearly there. Once she had her mother's present, all she had to do was wait for her birthday.
Okay,
Sparkler said, getting a quill from an inkwell she had finished wrapping the necklace's box of, as well as a small card.
Who's this being made out to?
My mama,
Dinky said happily.
That's right. Happy birthday, Mama. Love, Dinky Doo.
Short and simple,
Sparkler said with a smile as he wrote.
Those are the... Wait. What was your second name?
Dinky's eyes were closed and concentrated as she separated and counted out her bits. She did see the look that Sparkler had affixed her with.
Doo!
She said as she set down the last stack. This one of 6 bits, one of which could be broken down into jangles, that Sparkler would owe her.
Like Ditzy Doo. She's my mama. You probably heard of her since she saved the world.
Dinky's voice trailed off as he looked at Sparkler. The unicorn was staring at her, her expression completely unreadable as he seemed to be flipping through every emotion there was.
But,
Sparkler said at last,
does that mean you're my...
The door to Amethyst Star's Jewlers was thrown open. Dinky and Sparkler both looked to the entrance after leaping simultaneously in shock, both dropping the items that they had been holding. Dinky's eyes widened.
Mama!
She exclaimed, recognizing from the panting sight of her mother in her mailmare's uniform. Her hat was missing, and her eyes were focused forward. Dinky saw her surprise falling apart in front of her eyes.
No!
She exclaimed, taking a few steps forward.
Mama, you can't be here. You're ruining the surprise.
You! Sparkler exclaimed. Dinky blinked at the intensity, looking behind her. She saw that Sparkler's face was contorted in rage. You! What are you doing here? You... Homebreaker! Ditzy Doo danced forward, placing herself between her filly and Sparkler.
Not here.
Ditzy begged. Dinky's eyes widened. She expected. She wasn't sure what she expected, but she certainly hadn't expected the pained, submissive voice that her mother was using.
Please, not here. Not in front, Dinky. She doesn't know,
Sparkler. Don't call me that!
Mrs. Star, not in front, Dinky. Please, please.
Sparkler stared at Ditzy, then down to Dinky. She closed her eyes, horn glowing brightly. Ditzy Doo flinched, wings spread wide as he moved to seal Dinky. But all that happened was that Sparkler shoved the bits that Dinky had taken from her bag back into it, then hurled the bag to the ground in front of Ditzy. Get out! Sparkler spat. Now.
Okay.
Ditzy said, again almost sounding like she was apologizing as he grabbed Ditzy's school bag in her teeth before slinging it over her shoulders, adding it to the mail bags he was already carrying.
Okay. Thank you.
Out! Dinky didn't need more encouragement, it seemed, as she used her wings to guide Dinky from the store. The unicorn's filly's eyes were wide as he tried to process what had happened. It had been so fast.
Mama?
Dinky asked as the door to the jewelry store closed, and Ditzy stood still. More than a few ponies were standing outside of it, and it looked like a tornado had passed through Ponyville right up to Amethyst Star's shop. The Ponyvillians were staring at Dinky and Ditzy as they emerged.
Mama? What happened? Why was Sparkler mad at you and... Mama?
Dinky trotted up to look her mother in the eyes. Immediately she wished she hadn't. Ditzy's eyes were tearing up fast, already releasing a deluge.
Mama? Why are you crying? What happened?
Ditzy didn't immediately respond. Instead, breathing in deeply and releasing her breaths only slowly, rubbing her tears from her eyes as he did.
Nothing.
She lied transparently.
Come on, Dinky. We need to go home.
Dinky blinked as her mother began trying off.
But you're supposed to still be working, and you're crying. Why?
Home, Dinky, Ditzy repeated, not looking over her shoulder. She didn't need to, as Dinky was following close by, still trying to figure out what had happened.